Welcome to Breaking Financial Chains, where we combine practical money guidance with emotional healing to help you break free from financial limitations. I'm Tanya Riverson, your financial wingwoman.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Breaking Financial Chains, the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about breaking generational financial cycles. So this one might feel a little bit heavy. It's taken me a lot of thought around the planning of what I wanted to say within this episode. It's sort of the themes along the lines of legacy work, generational healing, and creating a new financial story for some people. Because what we often don't realise is the generational cycles around wealth and finances are quite often the weight that you were never meant to carry, the weight that you didn't realise you were always carrying, and also is something that you're well within your rights and is well within your capability to acknowledge and put down. These are not things that you necessarily have to continue to carry if they don't serve you any longer. So you might be the first in your family to earn well, to build savings, or even to talk about money or start to share your experiences, or perhaps ways in which you make money, save money, the decisions that you make along with spending. And if that is you, if that is something that you have learned from outside of your loved ones, outside of your family circle, that can feel both powerful and quite lonely. So it's almost sort of introducing for the first time for me to talk about things around inherited financial programming, something that we've learnt, that we've picked up, the stories that have been passed down without even realising, because we copy. As human beings, we often have the examples set and led out for us, and we do what's always been done because we always have. It links to epigenetics, and it's that whole not questioning. Because what do you mean this isn't a normal thing to do? This is what I have seen as a child. This is the way that I have been raised. This is what I saw my mum do, my grandmother do, my father do, my grandfather do, all the close members of your family do. And why wouldn't you do the same? In the same way as you might still buy the same brand of washing powder from the supermarket, or you may buy the same brand of baked beans, because that's just something that you grew up with, it's something that you've always had. What do you mean you don't have Heinz baked beans? Well, those are the only beans that I eat. I can't eat Branston beans or a supermarket's own brand of beans. That's just a complete made up example, but it's that patterning, it's that behaviour that we follow on from something that's been set for us for the sake of it, because we've never bothered to question. Because why would we? Because we followed our parents around the supermarket, and when we opened the cupboards at home, that was the brand that was there. So those are the beans that you buy. And it's the same with our behaviours around money. So what are generational financial cycles? Well, they're beliefs, behaviours, and fears around money that are handed down. By example, it might be through verbal examples, or it might be silently. It might be the fact that we saw dad go to work and mum stayed at home. It might be the fact that we saw dad bring the money in and we saw mum spend the money with the weekly shop or the household purchases that we needed. It might be the fact that we saw mum spend the money. We didn't see dad save the money, and that is a very general example. There could be very, very different ways in which you were raised, but it's those things, acknowledging and remembering exactly what was the norm for you. This isn't necessarily just about poverty, it's about fear, it's about secrecy around money, the whole taboo about it not being something that we talk about, potentially control, financial abuse, and shame. Shame around wanting to do something differently, particularly when we go out into the big wide world and we start to see other examples of what other people's normal is, and we start to think, oh my goodness, that's a really weird way to do that, but it's not for them, that's their norm. Examples of cycles that you might be breaking might be a scarcity mindset, the learned response of we can't afford it. Are we going on holiday? No, we can't afford it. Can we get a takeaway? No, we can't afford it. Do you think I'm made of money? Do you think money grows on trees? All of those ever repeated, so common, well worn out phrases that are just the things that potentially might be there as a response. And we don't question where they come from. We don't think about that response is appropriate to that question. It just becomes an automatic, almost like a reflex, because that's something that we saw, because that's the way that we were brought up. It becomes a life script. Oh, I've got an itchy nose today. Financial dependence is a cycle that you might be breaking. So the example that to be stable, to have financial security, you needed to be married. The expectation from family members, particularly older family members, that was exactly what you did. You got married and then you bought the home because you had that stability, and then you raised a family because you had that stability, because that came from the marriage, rather than that stability coming from within yourself, with your own earnings, with your own business. Understanding that we don't have to do what was always done. Just because that worked for somebody else in a completely different generation, that's not something that we need to do right now. But that doesn't mean that you might not be under that pressure or be questioned that that's something that you should be doing. Another example of cycles that you might be breaking might be money avoidance. So never talking about finances because it's not ladylike, or it's not something that we do, or it's really vulgar to talk about money. It's really vulgar to talk about earnings and salary and all of those things. For me, I was threatened with a thick ear when I asked my dad how much money he earned. So that whole association then for me around violence, or not being able to ask what other people that you're working with earn, because talking about salary is a sackable offence. So the fear then of losing my job if I break that rule becomes something that means I instantly shut down that line of questioning. But so what? You know, it's what keeps people silent. It's what keeps people in a cycle of fear, of not having parity with your peers in the workplace or in a business. That's all it does. It helps to keep people stuck by not elevating our voices and talking about our experiences. Another example of a cycle that we might be looking to break is hyper control or hoarding. So that might be fear-based saving or secrecy around money and not sharing that with anybody else. So this can be quite triggering for some people. Know that when you're exploring or going down this route, that you are safe, that you can do this on your own, either journaling or using some of the prompts that I'm going to share with you at the end of this episode, or you can do it with some accountability with a trusted friend or with a financial coach as well. So how do we know if these cycles are something that are showing up for you? How do we know what they look like in you? Well, it might be that you feel guilty for earning more than your parents did. A line that my dad once said to me was that he earns more than a captain in the army and I would never earn as much as him. So it was a whole self-worth piece for me to have to work through. And also, to be completely honest with you, it was a little bit like a red rag to a bull, almost a really, well, I didn't say hold my beer as a child, but you know what I mean, almost like, oh, okay, well, let's see if I can disprove that statement then, and I did, which makes me feel pretty good. But that might not show up as a way of bolstering you to achieve something or to prove somebody wrong. That could end up leaving you feeling guilty because of the lifestyle that you can now have that your parents never had, particularly if you earn that money in a different way, or there was an expectation that you have to work hard for your money. You only get out what you put in, and therefore to earn more you have to work more. And these are all things that we can challenge and do differently as we're learning more and more, particularly in this technological age with AI, etc. There are different ways of doing things that just weren't available in earlier generations. Another way that this might show up is feeling too much when you succeed, and then potentially feeling the need to sort of dampen down how that feels for you. Dampening down and showing up as your true authentic self, and not being able to share or be proud, or not necessarily want to shout and jump around and gloat, but to say, I've just earned this money and I worked really hard for it, and it's given me a real sense of achievement and fulfillment because of what it's taken for me to get there, and I'm really proud. If you don't have anybody in your life that you can say that to, then that's going to affect the way that you're showing up and the way that this is presenting and showing up in you. You may be overspending to overcompensate for childhood lack. So being brought up in a certain way and then having access to money could mean that you then choose to, I couldn't have it as a child, I'm going to have it now. I am going to prove to my children that I didn't have it, but they don't need to live in the same way. They don't need to have the same feelings of not wearing certain brands or not wearing certain clothes or being picked on and bullied at school because you wore high street brands or budget brands. I remember shopping in Matalan for a school coat. I went to a private school. That was something I felt incredibly ashamed about. I had clothes bought for me at the local market in Preston instead of bought from a catalogue or a high street shop. I was embarrassed for people to see the labels in my clothes because the majority of my friends did wear branded, labelled Levi's jeans, etc., and shopped in Tammy Girl and Miss Selfridge and those sorts of places that I didn't. We just weren't able to where I was growing up. So that's how it can show up. Undercharging or underearning because of subconscious loyalty. This is something I struggled with massively, along the lines of deserving to be paid for the time that I gave, for the work and for the expertise that I was sharing with clients. Not being able to have those conversations around money, or delaying sending a quote, or not chasing when payment isn't received on the agreeable terms. It can show up and really affect how you run the business if we're not understanding and recognising why this behaviour plays out for us in a certain way. It can be really quite tricky to be the first if this is you. There's a lot of emotional conflict that comes with being that cycle breaker, being the change that you want to see to then set that example for your children. It can feel really, really uncomfortable to outgrow what you've come from, where you've come from, and almost like a disloyalty feeling around the whole you have more, and what does that then leave behind? What feeling is that leaving behind for parents and people that have raised you? You may fear judgment, rejection, or not belonging anymore because you don't sort of fall into the same catchment of where you once were, at the same time as perhaps not really knowing how to get to where you're going, because that's all very new as well. So it can feel incredibly unsettling and unnerving to not be able to feel comfortable because everything's just so new, and because we need to have reference points in our mind to feel safe as human beings. If this is something that you haven't had before, or you're finding yourself in this situation for the first time, and having never been taught how to manage money or what to do with money when you have it, can be really difficult. And it's also, if we are conditioned in that way, very difficult to speak up and say, actually, this is great having this money, but I don't have the first clue what to do with it. So having those trusted people around you, and people that you can refer to and ask questions around, can you just help me figure this out, because I haven't got the foggiest idea of what I'm doing. Or it might be that you do know and you are doing the right things, but because you haven't had someone share that with you or show you, you don't know if that's the right way or the best way or the most efficient way to get where you want to go. I think all of that then sort of is encompassed into say that the real fear is around leaving the familiar behind, or feeling as though you're walking away from your roots, and that real safety, emotional safety net as an individual. And again, disloyal, exactly as I said earlier on, it's sort of walking away from the roots of how you were raised, almost saying that you don't belong there anymore, and to some extent you don't, but that is not the reality of how it needs to be. What's really important is thinking about where breaking those cycles can take you. So having an understanding of what makes you feel fulfilled, as I talked about in an earlier episode, but at the same time then what breaking those cycles can mean for future generations, as an example. So what those changes mean your children see as normal instead of what you saw as normal. What are they going to? Well, of course we budget. Why would you not budget? We've always budgeted for the shopping. My mum has always shared, or my dad has always shared, this is how much we spend and this is what we need to buy. And if there's more in the we need to buy pile than the spend pile, then we've got a decision to make. And how do we go about doing that? Do we have a conversation? Do we cut some things from the pile of what we need to buy? How do we choose and decide? And it's a huge life skill to be able to share that with your children, to say, right, well, we've got some choices to make. Where do we compromise? Because otherwise, the ultimate compromise, if we don't stick to the budget, well then we're overspending and perhaps we're breaking promises to ourselves that we've set, and we're not meeting the goals that we want to achieve. And whilst that's okay if we can juggle something else, but there is always going to be a knock-on effect and a compromise that comes from changing those plans. It shifts the conversation from survival to strategy. It's about having a choice. It's about being able to compromise, exactly in the example that I've just given earlier on. It's an example of making one choice over another, because actually this choice takes me closer to what my goal is. It takes me closer to that feeling of fulfillment that we're chasing. The most exciting part, I have to say, is you can then become the blueprint for financial safety and self-worth, and an example and a ripple effect to everybody around you, if this then is something that you can learn to embody and understand that doing that without that feeling of guilt is precisely where you want to be. So how can we do it? How can we start to break these cycles? Well, it involves going quite deep. It involves understanding that these things have been layered and built upon over the years, over time, and it isn't something that you can sit down and have a 30-minute conversation about and be fixed. Great, that's sorted. That's now not an issue for me anymore. It involves going deep and unlayering, unpacking all of that history that has got you to where you are right now. So some examples or some great ways in which to do this are to journal around the money beliefs that you grew up with, those throwaway comments that whether you say them out loud or not, they're still the first thing that come into your mind, that we're not made of money. Do you think money grows on trees? Money is the root of all evil. These are all really common examples that I've had people share with me, and you will have your own from growing up, journaling around where they came from. What were the circumstances in which they were used? Who were the people that were saying them? How does it affect your belief around money? And is it actually your belief, or is it somebody else's? Because as we said right at the beginning, these are beliefs that we can safely put down if they no longer serve us. But if we don't know what we want to let go of, well, we don't know what to put down. So we do need to do some reflection around where these beliefs and stories have come from. Asking who this belongs to, do I want to keep it? This is a conscious choice as to whether you keep that belief, and it might take a little bit of work to rewire and drop that belief, but it is something with conscious effort and decisions and choices that you can change. Out of that then becomes creating new money beliefs, new money mantras, boundaries and habits. And that can start with something as simple as, once a month for 30 minutes, I'm going to look at my spending. I'm going to look at my bank statements and my credit card statements. I'm going to look at all of the sources of my income and where that money is going. And then you can start to consciously give those pennies and pounds a purpose, which feeds into the goal, which feeds into that feeling of fulfillment, because that's what's important to us. We can celebrate milestones, even if that's an emotional one, such as charging properly, such as not overgiving within the remit of an agreement that you're making with a client, such as saying no. If somebody refers a potential client to you, that doesn't mean that you have to say yes, you're going to work with them indefinitely. It is all about choice. But if we are in the situation where we have these golden handcuffs and we feel we have to say yes because of the circumstances and the lifestyle that we have, then that's going to take us in a different direction than what we've promised ourselves we're aiming for that feeling of fulfillment and those goals that we want to achieve. So, as ever, I'm going to share some reflection prompts with you, and I would love for you to share with me anything that comes up. So the first prompt for today: what money habits or beliefs did I inherit, and what do I want to rewrite? Because this is your story, this is your life, this is your direction. You get to change what that looks like. It doesn't have to be the way it's always been. You get to choose. That's the beauty of working on this. If my daughter copied my money behaviour, would I be proud? So that one might sting a little. Oh, it's almost like holding a mirror up. So instead of looking at how you treat yourself, how would you be with your daughter, somebody external to you? Such a powerful exercise to work through. So journal away, set yourself a timer and just see what comes up when you're writing these down. And please do reach out. I would love to hear any of the insights that you get from any of these exercises. To finish off though, for this episode, you're not selfish for wanting more. And by wanting more, I don't necessarily mean more money. This isn't about earning more or having more income. This is about wanting more for you. Financial cycles run deep, right? But if those financial cycles are getting in the way of us achieving where we want to go, then it's time for them to go. It's time for them to get out of the way, because we have got stuff to do. The chain can break with you. That's what the whole ethos of this whole podcast, breaking financial chains. These might be chains that are imposed by somebody else in the example of financial control and financial abuse. But a lot of the time, these are chains we place on ourselves with our own mind trying to keep us safe. When we understand where those chains come from, we have absolutely got the power to break those chains and make a different choice. The chain breaks with you, but the freedom flows forward. That is what gets to be pushed on. And the legacy isn't just what you leave behind, it's what you refuse to pass on. You get to make those changes. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining me today on Breaking Financial Chains. Remember, you have the power to transform your relationship with money one step at a time. If this episode helped you, please subscribe and leave a review to help others find their path to financial freedom. I'm Tanya, your financial wing woman, and I'll see you next week.